The room did not go quiet because Nora Bell won the award. It went quiet because the presenter added one line after reading her name. She began this orchard. Alone at 13. That was the line that changed the air. In the third row, an older man with silver hair lowered his eyes to the floor. He had spent 40 years hoping that sentence would stop echoing in his head. It never did, because he was the man who had told that 13-year-old girl to walk away. Let me take you back. Late March, 1974. Henderson County, North Carolina. The last snow was still hiding in the shadows of the Blue Ridge, and the apple trees on the Bell place were just starting to bud. Nora Bell pushed open the screen door at Pike Farm Machine, wearing her father's waxed orchard coat, the sleeves folded twice, and still swallowing her hands. His leather gloves hung from her fingers. His work boots were on her feet, packed with feed sackcloth so they would stay on when she walked. She looked like a child trying to impersonate the person the world had just buried. Because that was exactly what she was doing. Her father, Amos Bell, had died 11 days earlier under the North Block frost fan. A ruptured artery. 50 years old. Nora had found him before dawn, a wrench still beside his hand, the fan gearbox half open, where he had been trying to keep it running before the cold snap. 92 acres of mountain apples. 1 packing shed. 1 old flatbed. 3 hired pickers who only came during harvest. And the only person who truly knew how to keep all of it moving was gone before sunrise. So Nora came for the parts her father had ordered 2 days before he died. Vernon Pike owned the shop. 64. Long frame. Clean denim shirt buttoned to the throat. Reading glasses low on his nose. He looked up, saw the coat, the gloves, the boots, and understood all at once why she was there. Nora. Mr. Pike. I came for the gearbox kit and the pump seal my daddy ordered for the north fan. Vernon reached for the ticket. Amos Bell's handwriting. A dead man's handwriting can do something terrible to a room. It can make yesterday feel close enough to touch. He read the order once. Then again. You know what these are for? Yes, sir. Who's putting them in? I am. He set the paper down very gently. Nora, your father is gone. You need to go home and tell your mama to talk to one of the Henderson buyers. Sell the fruit rights for the season. Lease the back acreage if you have to. Protect the house. Protect your family. But do not try to run 92 acres of orchard by yourself. I'm not selling it. You are 13 years old. I know how old I am. You don't have the size for those ladders. You don't have the weight for that fan assembly. And you do not have the years it takes to keep an orchard alive through frost, blight, insects, picking crews, grading, storage, and market swings. Grown men drown in less than this. He did not say it cruelly. He said it the way experienced people say true things they wish were not true. Another man by the feed display nodded in quiet agreement. Vernon was not mocking her. He was trying to save her from a kind of losing he had seen before. Nora looked past him at the box parts on the shelf. Her father had ordered them while he was still alive enough to believe he would be the one installing them. Then she said, very clearly, the thing that would define the rest of her life. The night before he died, my daddy told me, if anything happens to me, you keep these trees alive. Don't let anyone strip this place down to a number. Don't let anyone tell you it's too much. You keep the orchard. So I need those parts. Are you going to sell them to me? Or am I driving to Asheville? Vernon stared at her for a long second. Then he turned, pulled the boxes from the shelf, and set them on the counter. $31.40. She counted it out from her father's tobacco tin. His money, his gloves, his coat, his boots. Every piece of strength she had that morning had belonged to a man who was already in the ground. She drove the mountain road home with a gearbox on the floorboard and the future of 92 acres riding in the cab beside her. And this is where most people would have broken. The north fan sat in the upper orchard like a wounded machine animal. Nora spent 3 days pulling the damaged gearbox with a chain hoist rigged to a roof beam in the packing shed because she could not lift it by hand. She bruised both shins, split 2 fingernails, and once dropped a socket so hard on the concrete she sat down and cried from sheer fatigue. Before picking it back up and getting back under the housing. On the 3rd evening, she got it seated. At 1:14 in the morning, frost came screaming down off the ridge. Nora woke to the thermometer outside the kitchen window. 28, and still falling. She ran to the north block in her father's boots over wool socks, struck the starter, and waded through one dead turn, then another, until the engine caught and the fan began dragging warmer air down through the rows. That first spring, she slept in fragments. 20 minutes on a cot in the shed, 40 in the truck, an hour at the kitchen table with her head on her arms while her mother kept one ear on the radio for freeze warnings. By daylight she was pruning. By noon she was mending drip lines. By afternoon she was mixing spray under instructions her father had written in the margins of an old feed ledger. At night, she was back under the fan housings listening for bearings that did not sound right. Neighbors drove by slowly. Some expected disaster. A few came close enough to see the opposite. Mrs. Lottie Green brought biscuits twice a week and left them on the porch without knocking. Sorrel stopped one afternoon to help Nora reset a ladder brace and said nothing at all about how young she was. In mountain country, silence can be a kind of respect. Summer hit hard. Fire blight showed after a wet week, and Nora cut infected wood until her wrists ached. She thinned fruit while school was still in session, rode the bus with pruning scratches across her forearms, then came home and worked until she could not feel her shoulders. She fell asleep in class twice, and once on the bus ride home. By September, the crop was not beautiful, but it was there. And when the first pick began, that is when the orchard asked the real question. Can you bring it in? Nora climbed ladders built for grown men and dragged field bags that knocked against her knees with every step. She picked until the skin between her thumb and index fingers split open. She packed by lantern light in the shed when the generator coughed and the power dipped. Her mother ran the tally sheets. Her little brothers stacked cull apples in slatted boxes and tried not to slow her down. For 23 straight days, Nora's life was wood rungs, cold dawn, bruised shoulders, and the smell of fruit and diesel. The buyers did not go easy on her because she was a child. That helped her, because pity does not teach standards. When she hauled the first full load to the storage house, the grader looked at the truck, looked at the girl climbing down from the driver's side, and asked where Amos was. Nora said, "He isn't coming." The man looked at the bins. The fruit was clean enough. "All right then," he said. "Let's see what you brought me." By the end of that season, the Bell place had paid the spray account, the fuel bill, the mechanic note on the flatbed, the property tax, and most of the bank loan Amos had taken in January. Most. That word matters. Because after every bill was stacked, circled, and paid as far as it would go, June Bell sat at the kitchen table with Nora and counted what remained. $218. That was all. $218 between a widowed mother, 3 children, and the next bloom. June stared at the number for so long it almost became another person in the room. "Nora, this won't carry us. I know. You're already doing the work of 2 men. Then I'll do winter pruning for sorrel, and crate repair for green, and whatever else I can find. You're 13. I still am tomorrow." June covered her mouth and cried into both hands, because there is a kind of success no parent ever wants from a child. The kind that proves the child can carry it. the kind that should never have been placed there in the first place. And then came the hail. Late October. A black front rolled over the ridge after dark and beat the upper rows with ice hard enough to shred leaves and scar fruit that had not yet been brought in. Nora stood in the shed doorway listening to it strike the roof and knew, in the terrible private way working people know, exactly how much money was being erased by sound. The next morning, Vernon Pike drove past the Bell Orchard and slowed near the gate. The place was still running. That was what unsettled him. The rows were trimmed, the ladders were stacked, the coal piles were where they should be. The lower fan had been greased recently. The child had done it. Not elegantly, not safely, not sustainably, but she had done it. A week later, Vernon loaded a crate into his truck. Belts, grease fittings, pruning saw blades, a used pressure gauge, and 2 fan bearings. He found Nora in the shed on a milk crate, stripping damaged fruit for cider sale because fresh market prices had been ruined by the hail scars. "Brought you some things," he said. "I can't pay for parts today. I didn't bring them to sell." She stood up slowly. "9 months ago, you told me to sell the crop, lease the land, and go home. I remember. I kept the trees alive. You did. I brought in the fruit. You did. I paid every bill I could reach. I know. Then were you wrong?" Vernon took off his glasses. "I was wrong about what you could do this year." He looked around the shed. The patched harness, the ledger on the nail, the little wool coat hanging by the door. "But I was not wrong to be afraid for you. Because surviving one season is not the same as building a life. You shouldn't have had to learn any of this alone. Then what are you here for? To offer the help I should have offered the first day you walked into my shop. That changed everything. Not overnight. Not magically. Not in the fake, easy way stories sometimes lie." Vernon Pike became the man Amos Bell had no time to keep being. He taught Nora how to schedule maintenance before breakdowns instead of after them. How to read a spray bill against the market, not against hope. How to test soil by section. How to price storage. How to walk rows after rain and see trouble before it spread. How to talk to a banker without sounding desperate. How to say no to debt dressed up as opportunity. He sharpened her saws without charging. He found a lighter orchard ladder that fit her height better. He made sure the fan engines had what they needed before the cold set in. When she was 16, he tracked down a used narrow tractor from a retiring grower near Waynesville and helped her bring it home. "Why are you doing this?" Nora asked once. "Because I mistook surrender for mercy," Vernon said. "And because your father trusted the right child." By the time Nora finished high school, she had become dangerous in the quiet, disciplined way mountains sometimes shape people. She knew her yields, her weak rows, her strongest rootstock, her average packout, her frost pockets, her bad accounts, her honest buyers, her wasted hours, and the difference between fear and warning. Her brothers grew up inside that example. Mother stayed in the farmhouse, watched every season come and go, and carried the strange grief of seeing her daughter become a grown woman far too fast. Then Nora did what people who survive the impossible often do. She built like she never wanted to be helpless again. In 1981, she bought 12 adjoining acres, cash. In 1987, she added a south-facing block, cash. In 1994, she expanded the packing shed and paid it off before the paint fully weathered. No note left standing. When lean years hit Appalachian growers, Bell Orchard did not fold. There was no land payment to suffocate it, no machinery debt waiting to bite through a bad harvest. Nora ran the place with a rule that sounded severe until you knew where it came from. If we can't survive the weather, we don't get to also die of what we owe. Vernon retired in the late 80s. On his last Friday at the shop, Nora drove over with a box of apples and a bottle of cider from the first premium batch she had ever bottled under the Bell name. "You told me to walk away," she said. "Worst advice I ever gave." "No, the first half of the best thing that ever happened to me." because then you came back and taught me how not to confuse stubbornness with wisdom. He died 7 years later. Nora carried his casket with 3 men who had known him longer than she had been alive. People noticed. Good. They were supposed to. Because some debts are not paid with money. Years passed. The orchard kept changing hands without ever leaving the family. More acreage, better rootstock, smarter storage, careful contracts. Still no debt. In 2003, Nora started an apprenticeship network for kids who lost farming parents before the operation could safely pass hands. Not charity, not rescue, trade, guidance, bookkeeping help, machinery triage, legal advice, winter planning, people to stand in the gap before a desperate family sold land they could have kept. She built the thing Vernon should have offered her before grief had to prove itself. By the time they gave Nora Bell the State Orchard Stewardship Award, the numbers sounded impossible. 146 owned acres in production. 0 debt. 17 consecutive years of top-tier soil conservation scores. But numbers were not what filled the room that night. It was the sentence. She began this orchard alone at 13. After the applause, a woman in her 50s came through the crowd holding an envelope. "I'm Ruth Pike," she said. "Vernon's daughter. My father talked about you until the end. Mostly one day. The day you walked into this shop in your daddy's coat and asked for those parts. He wrote something before he died." She handed Nora the envelope. Inside was a single folded page in Vernon Pike's careful block handwriting. "Nora, I told you to let the orchard go, because I thought I was protecting what was left of your family. You stayed because your father told you to stay. I was not wrong about the danger. I was wrong about you. I spent years trying to repair one sentence spoken to a child in grief. I never fully repaired it, but watching what you built came close. You were not too young. You were early, and you became one of the finest growers I ever knew. Vernon." Nora read it once, then again. Then she folded it and put it inside the pocket of the same kind of waxed orchard coat she still wore in cold weather, though this one fit her now. A reporter asked Nora not long ago what she would say to a child standing in the wreckage of a family operation everybody else had already written off. She thought about it for a long moment. Then she said, "I'd tell them what my father told me. Keep the orchard. Don't let anyone turn your life into salvage too early. Then I'd tell them what Vernon taught me after he was done being wrong. Doing it yourself and doing it alone are not the same thing." That may be the whole story. A child can carry more than the world thinks. That does not mean the world gets to leave them carrying it by themselves. The mechanic told a girl in a dead man's coat to sell the trees. She kept them alive. He came back, taught her how to keep them for life, and together they changed what survival looked like for every child who came after. So when somebody tells you a burden is too big for the shoulders under it, maybe look twice. Maybe the first question is not, can they carry it? Maybe the first question is, who is willing to help them carry it long enough for the strength to arrive?